Welcome. Welcome to Poetry Flash in Berkeley, California. And tonight, we are delighted to present a reading by Leila, Chatti and Lubna, Safi. I'm Joyce Jenkins, director and editor of Poetry Flash. Featured books for this reading are available at bookshop.org/shop/poetryflash. Sales benefit the series. Since this is a pre-publication party for Lubna Safi's debut book, the book may show as a back order since the pub date is actually August 2nd. It is also available from the publisher, Texas Tech University Press. Leila Chatti's lovely new chapbook is available from writerscenter.org. The links for these books are in the chat box. The Poetry Flash reading series is co-sponsored by Moe's Books in Berkeley. And hopefully soon it will be opening to in-person events, but not yet, which is why we're gathered here tonight on Zoom. To the best of our tech ability, you were muted on entry. Please stay muted. This event is being recorded and will be posted on the Poetry Flash YouTube channel and Facebook page, where it can be shared after the event. At the end, when the recording ends, we'll keep the Zoom on for a few minutes, so those of you that have joined us live can ask a question or say hello. And remember to visit Poetry Flash to join our email list or to read insightful interviews, reviews, and news about upcoming events all over California. Our first reader is Leila Chatti. We're really honored to have her with us tonight. Her debut full-length collection that you may know is Deluge, winner of the 2021 Levis Reading Prize, and it was longlisted for the 2021 Penn Open Book Award. Naomi Shihab Nye said, "To write a series of poems out of extreme illness is a bracing accomplishment indeed. In Deluge, Leila Chatti, born of a Catholic mother and a Muslim father, brilliantly explores the trauma. In a frightening 2-year saga of a tumor and the flooding it caused, Chatti finds not disassociation, but deeper association with her own experience. She is also co-author of The Mothers, Poems in Conversation, and A Conversation, a really lovely new chapbook with the poet Dorianne Locks. She is a Tunisian-American dual citizen born in Oakland. Chatti has lived in the United States, Tunisia, and southern France. Her poems have received prizes from Plowshare's Emerging Writers Contest, Narratives 30 Below Contest, the Pushcart Prize, among many others. Her work has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, Poetry, The Nation, The Atlantic, everywhere you've thought of, just many, many places. And it's really an honor to have her with us tonight. Please welcome Leila Chatti.
Hi, thank you so much. What a nice introduction. I'm so excited to be with you from afar, and Lubna, so happy to be with you too. I was indeed born in Oakland, so this feels like a good, I don't know, energy coming across from there. And I'm really excited about this. Thank you all for being here too, wherever you all find yourselves in the world. I'm gonna read quickly because I want to hear Lubna's poems. So selfishly, I'm gonna go a little fast. Not too fast, but I'll read, I think first a couple poems from my full length, and then some new things. Yeah, and I don't usually talk between poems, despite my last name, I like to kind of move right through. But I will say that my full length is about a period of illness that began in my early 20s. Okay. I'll start with the first poem, which is called Confession. And it begins with an epigraph from when Mary is giving birth to Jesus in the Quran. She says, "Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten. Truth be told, I like Mary a little better when I imagine her like this, crouched and cursing, a boy god pushing on her cervix. I like remembering she had a cervix, her body ordinary, and so like mine. Girl sweat lacing rivulets like veins in the sand, her small hands on her knees, not doves, but hands, gripping, a palm pressed to her spine, fronds whispering with voyeurs overhead. Oh, Mary, like a god, I too take pleasure in knowing you were not all holy that ate could undo you. I cannot. And suffering, I admire this girl who cared for a moment not about God or his plans, but her own distinct life. This fiercer Mary who'd disappear if it saved her, who'd howl to hell with salvation if it meant this pain, the blessed adolescent who squatted indignant in a desert, bearing his child like a secret she never wanted to hear. Mubtadiya, Arabic, beginner, one who sees blood for the first time. And indeed, appointed over you are keepers, noble and recording. They know whatever you do. The Holy Quran. Hidden in a dim stall as the muezzin called all worshippers to prayer, I touched privately the indelible stain and watched with a nascent sense of kinship the women washing through the interstice of the door, their veils slipping off like water, water spotting their clothes like rain. I thought the thought only children and the pious believe that I was just like that, no longer a girl. The blood, my summons, blot like a seal, a scarlet membership card slid from my innermost pocket. I was nearly 12 and wise enough to be frightened. I had read the book and so understood my own was now opening, alighting onto my shoulders like some ethereal bird flapping briefly immaculate wings, and understood too that I myself engendered the ink with which on its pages my sins would forever be written. Not literally, but this was how I imagined it. Metaphor, as the blood brought gods recorders like sharks to me, Monarch a bright flare, a matador's crimson cape. I had not been good all my life, but until this first vermilion drip, I lived unobserved. My sins, not sins, because no one looked. And now, above, like a lamp suddenly ablaze, God's reproachful eye turned my way, a searchlight eternally searching and seeing and seeing. I was as good as I would ever be. In the dark, the ruddy iris stared back at me. Sarcoma. When the doctor says the word sarcoma, I consider how it might be a nice name for a daughter, that good feminine A, the way parents name their children for all sorts of inappropriate things. Apples, for instance, or the place where the baby was conceived. And I trace my fingers over the barrow of my belly as he speaks, flesh distended beneath the blue tissue I wear for a dress, an ideal grief rock, throwaway. And he says something about life expectancy, but of course, I expect my life. So plain, I thought nothing would ever take it. And while he explains, I cut my palms around my center. as if comforting a child or covering her ears. Litany while reading scripture in the gynecologic oncology waiting room. And God said, let there be blood. And God said, flood. And God said, good is a woman with fruit in her womb and nut in her hand. And God said, sin. And God did not say, forgive. And God said, I will make a stormy wind. And God said, sun, a breath stirring. And God said, highly favored. And God said, condemned. And God said, I will blot out men whom I have created, for I am sorry that I have made them. And God said, listen, and sank a boy in her like a stone. Angel. After a month of asking, suddenly, a voice. It says you deserve that which has happened to you. It says, I see what you do with your long terrain hands. Maundering through the banalities of my life, it follows, speaking as if from a frosty bag of peas in the freezer aisle, speaking while I am on my knees, scrubbing the bathroom floor, trying to love a man. Its speech is disquieting company, but company nonetheless. A TV left on and turned low. It desperately wants my attention, but is polite, which is its defining weakness. Sometimes I catch it stirring out of the corner of my eye, a glint at the end of my cat's whiskers, a spangle on the ceiling of indiscernible source. More often, though, it looks like me, only a little off, like my reflection in the pregnant belly of a spoon. In fact, when I speak to it, I use my own name. I'm not sure if it minds. It repeats instead its refrain. It says, God has plans for you. It says, I didn't say they were good. Hymen. Second blood, I never knew you. After the first, scoured the bed for your blazoned blot and came up empty. Perhaps I was born without you. A box with no prize inside, a sundae with no cherry on top. God of good girls, God of matrimony, mother state, which I consider a distant country with a discordant tongue, did you speak with God and conclude I hadn't use for you? Once I was small as your kin, so small, and for such a long time, longer than I've lived, I fit inside my mother when she fit inside her mother, and so on and so forth, and further, a nest of matrons, me's and a beam, in which to be female is to be something like infinity, and was it determined then what kind of woman I would be? It seems I've always been frightened, little veil of wedlock's lock clicking shut. The heritable procession of women whispering in the aisle of my pulse, don't do, don't do, don't. And I haven't done this, the graveman, the grave I've dug with the spade of pleasure. But wanting seal of want, I did want it, did choose to commit my life's greatest transgression with a benevolent accomplice. And so in the here before, you could say I'm among the spared. What a mess this messlessness of you could have been in any number of lives my size, billowing specters of dresses on a line of possibility, lives in which I am the bridesmaid and you, maidenhead, the bride given away, where I am the acquired property and you, the red ribbon severed in the threshold, I, the purse, and you, the coin tendered. Perhaps no one ever told you, precious emblem of innocence, simulacrum for honor, that some believe you the most important part of me, vital, like a heart a man gets the thrill of bursting where he can see it, that blood is owed to him. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Of a woman, you, the only blood worth anything. Okay. I'm going to finish up with 2 from this and then move. Okay. Questions directed toward the idea of Mary. Was it the voice you feared or its shadow? Did you long for his touch, or was suffering enough for you to know he was there? Do you resent me, my juvenile hungers? Do you wish for me the freedom of a vast, barren plain? What would you have done with your body if your body obliged? Did it please you, your sun risen at the end like a question? Do you pity the angels, their ancillary lives? Did your worship falter once you were sure you were good? How long did you live before yielding to your inevitable shame? And how long before you realized? Did you realize? Shame was a blade you turned against yourself. And once you knew it, you could use it. Exegesis. I bled. God didn't want to hear about it. He said unclean, and so it was. He said it is harm, and so it was. Want to hear about it? He said unclean. Once a woman wanted, so he did her harm. And so it was first conceived, a woman suffering because a woman wanted. So he said, cursed. And then he said, blessed. The woman chose to suffer, conceived a God, though she never knew a man. And God knows best. If he calls a curse a blessing, then so it is. And he said she was clean. She never knew a man. I've known men, but never a God that bled and lived. But I did. Okay, I'm going to read 2 that are not in books, and then I'll finish with the chapter with Dorianne. Okay, I'll start with a poem called Tea. And I actually have 2 mugs of tea next to me, so it's fitting. Okay. Tea. 5 times a day, I make tea. I do this because I like the warmth in my hands, like the feeling of self-directed kindness. I'm not used to it, warmth and kindness both, so I create my own when I can. It's easy. You just pour water into a kettle and turn the knob and listen for the scream. I do this 5 times a day. Sometimes, when I'm pleased, I let out a little sound. A poet noticed this, and it made me feel I might one day properly be loved. Because no one is here to love me, I make tea for myself and leave the radio playing. I must remind myself I am here, and do so by noticing myself. My feet are cold inside my socks. They touch the ground. My stomach churns. My heart stutters. In my hands, I hold a warmth I make. I come from a people who pray 5 times a day and make tea. I admire the way they do both, how they drop to the ground wherever they are, drop pine nuts and mint sprigs in a glass. I think to care for the self is a kind of prayer. It is a gesture of devotion toward what is not always beloved or believed. I do not always believe in myself or love myself. I am sure there are times I am bad or gone or lying. In another's mouth, tea often means gossip, but sometimes means truth. Despite the trope, in my experience, my people do not lie for pleasure or when they should, even when it might be a gesture of kindness. But they are kind. If you were to visit, a woman would bring you a tray of tea at any time of day. My people love tea so much it was once considered a sickness. Their colonizers tried, as with any joy, to snuff it out. They feared a love so strong one might sell or kill their other loves for leaves and sugar. Teaism sounds like a kind of faith I'd buy into, a God I wouldn't fear. I think now I truly believe I wouldn't kill anyone for love, not even myself. Most days, I can barely get out of bed. So I make tea. I stand at the window while I wait. My feet are cold and the radio plays its little sounds. I do the small thing I know how to do to care for myself. I'm trying to notice joy, which means survive. I do this all day. And then the next. Okay, and this is one on my phone, which I don't usually do, but I don't have a printer. It's called The Reversal. A man who tries very hard to love me convinces me to leave, for the first time in days, my bed, to go outside, to see the frozen lake. And despite the grandeur of the vast white field and the novelty of boys walking across it like novice deities, I am most interested in the geese. Look at them sleeping, I say, nodding to where they rest in a line along the edge of the ice, where the ice is turning back into water in imperceptible degrees, the heady blue encroaching. And I, still addled by grief, still immoderately exhausted by being alive, consider, who knows why my mind does anything it does, how the world could be flipped. Blue lake for blue sky, birds and feathered hunks of ice like clouds. And I think then, naturally, of myself in this reversal, standing suddenly atop the firmament, one of heaven's citizens, perhaps now an angel, perhaps someone waiting in the long queue to be seen. And I consider what this would mean for me, my options. Once, someone who loved me fiercely said, "The dead have no options, Leila, they're dead." And the angels do nothing but God's will, loitering in the interminable meantime, useless as pigeons. Here, the geese sleep at the edge of the thaw, unbothered, and winter and the boys forge ahead. And the man goes on loving me in the periphery. So I write the earth. I stay there as long as I can bear, looking at it. I'll finish with 2 from the chapbook. And this is with Dorianne. It's called The Mothers. She's wonderful, also a Bay Area person. We're all Bay Area at heart. Okay. This poem is called Trying. When I see the article about the polar bears wandering into Russian homes, I leave it open unread for a week and consider this trying. Because I am trying to be honest, I can't say I am doing my best or even trying my best, But at the very least, at my very worst, I'm trying. I wake up and this is trying, by which I mean I am sad and yet participate in the requisite functions of my life, usually without audible complaint or demonstrative suffering, trying for others' benefit to be polite, or trying to be honest because I'm embarrassed to be suffering. But I also mean this, that I'm sad and it is difficult, a trial, a circumstance that tries my patience. The sadness is so annoying. I'm so sad, it drives me crazy. Like everyone else, I try to do the dishes, to remember birthdays, not to pick at my degenerate skin. Because I'm female, I try to fulfill domestic labors, like cleaning out the fridge, an unreciprocated kindness. I try to improve my appearance without making it evident I care about my appearance. I try to care about the right things while making it clear I'm still trying with my appearance so that men might consider fucking me. And I should consider this privately the measure of my worth. And because I'm American, I try to keep up with the crisis de l'heure, with domestic politics and public displays of rage. I try to be productive. I try to remember reusable bags for my produce, to reduce my footprints, to check pronouns and my privilege. I try to do my part to cause little harm, but because I am alive, harm comes with the territory. The territory upon which I rent is stolen, the city gentrified, and all year an unseasonable heat that I, minor accomplice, have to try very hard not to delight in. Short sleeves in February, sweating through Halloween. I admit it, for no defensible reason, I still eat meat, still drive on occasion to the CVS down the street. I've been known to tell a joke that verges on mean. I'm trying, I mean it, to be good in a way that is not covertly gendered or self-serving, to be accountable, to practice virtue without announcement, to make at least half as good what I leave is how I found it. Trying for you, ink blot, mirage, standing in the artificial dawn on cold tile, golden dew on a stick, first snow, pawing at the window to get in. I'm gonna end, I'm back in Michigan right now, which is my home state. So I'm gonna end with a poem about my hometown, East Lansing, Michigan. Specifically, it's a strip mall in my hometown, and it's called Eastwood. Because it's June and there's nothing to do. We go to the strip mall at the edge of town. Someone's mother drives us. It isn't mine. These girls, they've got hair blaring red as a siren, no curfews. Boyfriends and runners are going all the way. I'm 14 and buttoned up in a blouse, bespectacled, a little shy. But last summer I tried to die, which makes me interesting. We loiter in the moist heat of the parking lot, calling lewd things to strangers across the relucent sea of asphalt, laughing with our whole mouths. Every part of us gleams, our licked fingers sticky from free Krispy Kremes, our lips glossed, cheap cherry. We're not that beautiful, but we're young, which to men, we're old enough to know, is close. We stare them down, perched on the curb. We bare our thighs like secrets that have hurt us. Sitting there, impatient, one girl might kiss suddenly, another, giggling, shadows merging on the pitted sidewalk, eyes open to see if they're seen. And at the very least, there's me, ever the apprentice in tenderness and nerve. When a man eventually, inevitably, approaches, we rise as birds do, all at once, flushed and shrieking until we regroup out of reach, our bodies heaving against each other as if we have narrowly escaped a fate we know to fear, but can't name. Then we do it again, to be sure. When the sun swells before the sky's mantling like a rosy bubble, we wander snapping hubba bubba as the streetlights pop on above us, proffer wishes and gossip like they're makeshift stars. We wait for someone to wonder where we are, find ourselves waiting long into the dark. I think we like this part best. The night falling over our shoulders like a borrowed sweatshirt, still warm. The blonde grasses whispering as we circle and circle the unclaimed lot, knowing that we could be forgotten, but are not. And if we listen hard before someone comes for us, some nights our names are called between guitar riffs and the classic rock station, blaring from rusted cars and the bar patio across the street. Songs we know by heart, songs our fathers once sang to our mothers before they were ours or anyone's, ballads that made them believe it was possible they could, a lifetime, love, be loved, desperately, like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leila Chatti. Thank you so much for that beautiful reading, beaming all the way across the continent from Michigan to Berkeley, California. So thank you. Thank you. Now, we are really, really happy to be able to celebrate a brand new, beautiful book, a very important debut. Lubna Safdie's debut poetry collection is Your Blue and the Quiet Lament, winner of the Walt McDonald Prize, first book series in poetry. Texas Tech University Press says, Your Blue and the Quiet Lament records the textures of grief after a cousin's murder at the hands of the Syrian state reaches the poet through a long-distance phone call. The poems trace a narrative of arrest, imprisonment, and torture in Syria and interweave the difficulties of family experiences in the diaspora, shifting between the death of poet Federico Garcia Lorca and that of her cousin. Lubna's poetry contends with the personal loss by distancing the meaning of one death through the intermediary of another. Yet the distortion of distance is already there in the language, in the geographic space, in time, in the grief itself, tinged with blue. Lubna Safdie also writes fiction, literary criticism, and lyric essays. Her work has appeared, again, very widely, Guernica, The Journal, Mizna, and elsewhere. She is currently completing a PhD at the University of California, Berkeley, so she's only about a mile from here, I'm happy to say. We are so looking forward to this reading from this important new book. Please welcome Lubna Safi.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you, Leila, for your reading and for joining me. And thank you, Rosalinda, for dealing with the technology. And thank you all for joining me on this lovely evening here in the Bay Area and elsewhere, if you are elsewhere. I know Leila's coming in from Michigan, and I see my family's here on the East Coast as well, so hello to them. Okay, so I'm going to be reading, and I'm also not a very chatty poet in between the poems, so I won't be speaking too much. Just to say that this book does kind of work a lot with or think a lot with the poet Federico Garcia Lorca. The title actually comes from one of his poems called the Elegy to Silence, and the verses go, "The winter air splinters your blue, and the quiet lament of some cool spring cuts through your groves." So without further ado, I'm going to read the first poem, titled "My Mother No Longer Paints with the Color Blue." My mother sees nothing with her hands canvassed across her lap, except the shade of every blue she ever painted. Her other paint tubes clotted red, purple, and black. When she paints, my mother looks without seeing me. Her fingers feathered with the clarified blue smudges of a sky, fortified blues of the ocean, the melancholic sapphires of the late night hours, not white for snow, just bluish marks of what passes, or blue nothing at all. I cannot explain what happened, only that it emerged out of the blue. The painter, she used scorched earth to capture the stain of what had passed beyond the window. So one of the reasons that besides my intense love for Lorca, is that Lorca was he was assassinated. He died in 1936, sort of at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War. He was shot by Francoist forces. And, for this kind of analogy between his death and my cousin's death, who died also at the kind of early stages of the Syrian revolution at the hands of the state, I have this dear connection to the poets. So this poem is called Shot and Buried with Lorca. I used to hear the dead speak like verses in Lorca's poems, barely audible. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Their jawline punctured by putrid air, flesh oozing from the mouth of a page full-bodied, they appeared to walk right out of the words, poor creatures in a dream groping for God. Not Lorca after the cantilevered prayer, not August with the daylight fading, not the curve of a rifle hit the head, not his face washed thin by the last sunlight, not a tree where the body fell, instead, a November fog, and the 11th day over with a choking sound. I skip lines to avoid the end of the poem, but I can't outrun the news that has reached me, that his mother withheld, that his father didn't know, that my cousin had covered himself with God and died in a shroud. So in this next poem, the word jiddo means grandfather in Arabic, in the Levantine dialect of Arabic. Photograph with Jiddo in Damascus. His palm open, fingers curled to catch the landing of my small fist, egg tight in the clutch of a nest. Though he shed most of it around the cap, my grandfather's hair never turned white. The Syrian saying goes, he got out of it like a wisp of hair in dough. But this poem is not about Syria yet. My mother had kneeled down in this still life. We are at eye level. Behind her, the porcelain plates, and beyond, just before the flash, Jiddo still holding my fist, but we could not bear to see even then. To say something of the truth. You say, I trembled like thunder, but your body is not a cloud. You say, I passed by the sharp fragrance of a hidden flower. Fire can be drawn even from the greenest wood. You say, the eyes are windows to the soul. In your saying, I notice your eyes disappear. I too live where no domes or minarets silhouette the horizon, though I still wake up before the sun outlines the orange sky between the eclipses of two swallows, because the heart itself is a matter of curves. You say, I can't write lover without over. The word deserted also implies an oasis. You write, the soul resembles fire. No, the soul is more concealed than that. You say, saffron is more valuable than opium. You have to harvest the flower by hand. An eyelash has fallen onto the surface of your face. I pinch the thinning skin and ask you what to do with it. Okay, so the next poem is titled, In Another Universe, My Father Leaves with His Knife. Somewhere in Damascus, cement against bone, my father broke his wrist in a fight, rotated it right out of cuff, a grind ache that halted future injuries, usually sustained by the handful. Jiddo had taken the khanjar, the brazen crescent handle his son had clung to, wrist grip as if an extension of himself. The knife that once before my grandfather had also clenched to teach his son the consequences choices create. When through the pigeons my father had been raising on the roof went the curved khanjar's blade, before my father packed it along with the rest of what he took to leave Syria. The fragile joint of the body that once articulated and moved freely. From a distance, the country now appears like a gun, sides with cut-off angles and uneven distribution. My father rewrote his letters in exile, agonized over the words etched as if by the ridge of a rib. To learn what to leave means when in a new country, he opened the suitcase to find that his knife was not there. The next poem is titled Tazia. A day like any other, then to stomach the intrusion of condolences. Certain intrusions into the heart are acceptable, like slicing into a marine animal to find that it has three. The sigh with no relief chimes of at least we have a body to bury, to wash, to run wet hands on the wounds like clay. Before the camphor cleaned torture marks and lotus-infused bullet holes, we mined the cold metal flesh of shrapnel missed by the autopsy. Cousin, with whose touch is your skin crawling beneath the shroud? No, then. We did what the remaining know to do. Through. We scraped a song from the throat. Kin, 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 cousin, kin, 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 cousin, cousin, kin, kin, cousin, cousin. Our love, the noise that ancient warriors made before battle. The wrist hung, the slap, the skin punch of something so heavy that it could be held by something as small as a day. Human longing found trapped in amber. That night, the hum of your human body, the long road had emerged between us. A hollow inside me, bowstrung, taut, and tuned to the quiver, like a stray remark at the edge of a long-winded conversation. I try to escape my history, a permanent nitpicking of the wound, the scar of a homeland that won't fade. I tell you about the scab of my cousin's death. You are busy, fine-souled and neck-bearing, unreachable even by the longest sentence. In the dark that draws and loosens the bodies of lovers, we try to be gentle, gentler even than lovers, our eyes closed like fists listening. How love frauds the tongue loose when my ear catches your truant voice. I like the rarefied air around your words, cut with fermented exhales, even the serpentine walls of your embrace. Your heart, and this is why it's heavy, is cast in gold. So I don't ask you for comfort. I've seen how your words seek what they long for and instead find the void. This poem is called For Vicenta Lorca After Her Son's Death. Beneath the tree at the disgraced mouth of the Vega, the earth, a borderline on the other side of which is death. A soul has come back to the body, as if there could be after the loss. Mother of, to consult the water, you need only lower a finger. To have said this is all over when it had just begun. Out of breath and swift, like a decision or a guillotine. Sometimes it is death with the light leaving the valley. Sometimes it is late with the blue wound loosening. If there is no grave, it's because where he was shot is a slipstream of language, reducing the world to just this world. When they dug the turning soil beating as if vesseled, there was no blood, just roots. Damascus Epitaph. The graves have no names. There are no bodies to set in the dirt, just the earth, a maddening dusk, immortal words and dead air echoes perfect for contemplation. A shadow moved in a ripple as if agitated in water. The sunset gave the landscape antlers of a raging deer. Jasmines bulked along an infinite pavement lined with sighs and a string of sobs. A gash on the cheek, and the heart came out on its own. Here, all that could be admitted, a deserted land beneath a jagged blue cloud in the shape of a shoe. So in the last part of the next poem I'm going to be reading, it's a direct translation of the last thing that Lorca had ever wrote, because when he was in jail, he was given a piece of paper to write his last letter to his father. And I've kind of transcribed that into this poem. So, last letter from the young poet. Inside a cell in Granada, Lorca faced an empty paper, flat as a depleted heart. In his hands, an acute nakedness, stretched to resemble writing. Just as he begins, a stranger arrives, who has never seen him painted or written or in love, just resigned and afraid. With a hand, he forces the poet's last message. Dear Father, please give the bearer of this letter a donation of 1,000 pesetas for the armed forces. Love, Federico. An August ending. I learned how to love from my mother, Garcia Lorca, and the archive of the sky where the crescent fans out, a sliver of a new moon in the hands of the old. On the same day, almost 9 decades later, I was born on an earth Lorca disappeared into. I sobbed in my room for the Andalusian martyr. My walls were full of water, hallowed in the pipes. I crowded my poems with a public grief. The offbeat of a sob behind closed doors escaped like nervous laughter. As far away as the other side of an entire country, I could hear the withered sound of an arid lament. What did I know of sacrifice? I learned it was wax on my mother's hands when she twisted my arm to wring out my leftover soul. She removed nothing. My heart was fine. I wasn't even sad. I had just reached the end of something. Okay, the absolute last whisper into the Vedic void. The first time I heard, I didn't. The second time I cried. I am beside myself. The wind drowns and blows my cries for you, for Lorca, for all that disappeared, and for the thin cornea of my eyes that caught no one. Your face in my hands isn't right. I know I can't use you like this forever. Your blue days, I'm writing you from there. Ritual quiet hands reach into the graves of words, believing I'll finally hold you in my trembling arms. Okay. A few more poems. I've gone kind of Lorca heavy with my selections today. Variations on a theme by Lorca. It's likely the moon. To that glossed elegy, all eyes are open. You wanted a clearer night, melancholy cries that woke the stars and no secrets. Your mother's look falls apart in your reflection. Your soul is a changing prism, skin like a small crystal. But you don't live like you're made of glass. The breath doesn't fade from you. Not transparent, still your verses shatter. When I read your moon poem, it ruined me. I don't know how it didn't ruin the world. You wanted the secret of spring, to know why the river runs slow and what floats above it, creaking of the just abandoned. Your Andalusian eyes thirsty for a spot where light intersects the dark, so your shadow consults the water. No one makes you, but it is love that you intend. You've given it your word, your body shadowed blue by the cold hand of an archangel. The door of the cell closing and the arpeggio of your fingers, a veiled reckoning, but nothing happens. The final reach, capsized orb floating by an altar of grates and a hand to halt the moon's departure. For love in these final hours to mean the stability of a life that was limping, to intend as in to seize a thing with your entire hand. It's the penultimate poem I'm going to be reading tonight. What my mother noticed when she didn't know it would be the last time she left. The highest mountain in Damascus makes a mess at its feet. Rocks, mosques, a tangle of trees and homes spiral toward the square her childhood home overlooks. Descending the summer cool stairs, then through the always propped gates, the air and the dust play, and the light, still leaving the building, draws a shadow beneath the long archways of jasmine vining around black iron grates. Unbearable at midday, she wouldn't have stopped to look. As she leaves, she doesn't think about the long pauses to come. Each step she takes closer to the distance between her and her language. She has learned to leave its fire everywhere, else her life will change. Not in the house of the building that shades her, what she remembers. At sunset, the white petals between the iron and leaves, the heart gone, and that girlhood smell. Okay, this is the last poem. It's called The Gist of It. And it's actually the last poem in the collection as well. Maybe because it was God, I woke up with a crick in my neck. I had laid down lopsided in the direction of paradise. I've written poems because men moved me first, and now I worry that I cling to God like a Happy Meal crown. I used to read poetry in the tenor of prayer. I followed memories in heavy-handed circles, the way a thumb guides a knife when peeling an apple. Now, upon first glance, things seem other than what they are. A line on the wall that wasn't a shadow, but a trail of black ants, a speck of dirt on my jacket, and I've almost flicked off a promising caterpillar. I broke my fingers on branches that wanted to be stems. An intimate quarrel turned into laughter at a distance. It may be that blue is an overused color, and that there are too many stones in poems and too many gods, and that everyone's mothers run between the lines. Maybe a lament is just a dying expression that can still be beckoned by an outstretched foot. I too placed my sorrow in the mouth of language. It was the main thing that gave me grief. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lubna Safi. It was wonderful to hear you read, and wonderful to hear you read Leila Chatti. I'm just really glad that we were able to present you tonight. This is just wonderful. And I'd like to thank you for reading, and to thank everyone who has joined us tonight. Thank you for logging on. And thanks to Rosalinda Monroy for our tech support. And please check out these books, these wonderful books. There are book links in the chat box, and bookshop.org/shop/poetryflash. Lubna's book will show up as back ordered, but that's because the actual publication date for the book is now August 2nd. So it won't actually, there's no way it could be shipped out before August 2nd. So that's why that is. And of course, it's also available from the publisher, Texas Tech University Press. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.